something a little different. I was supposed to do this video for Halloween, but I forgot. We're just gonna pretend it's still Halloween, and today we're gonna look into the Enfield haunting, and we're gonna determine whether it was a haunt or a hoax. I'm pretty much a skeptic, so this will be like from skeptic's point of view. If you have differing opinions, please leave them in the comments down below. In August 1977, Peggy Hudson, a single mother of 4, heard loud noises coming from her daughter's room. When she went to tell her daughters, Margaret 12 and Janet 11, to calm down and go to sleep, she didn't find them playing. Instead, the girls were cuddled in a corner, terrified. The girls told Peggy that the chest of drawers was moving towards the bedroom door. At first, Peggy thought the girls were playing some sort of prank on her, and she told them to stop being silly. But then she noticed the chest drawer moving towards the door, as if it was trying to trap the girls in the room. She tried to push the drawer back against the dresser, but the drawer wouldn't budge. The family ran across the street to ask for help from their neighbors, Vic and Peggy Nottingham. Vic went into the house to investigate, and he heard weird noises coming from around the house. The Hudsons called the police, and one police saw a chair wobble and slide but could not determine the cause of the movement. The police eventually decided this was not a police matter and left. This was only the beginning of 18-month haunting, during which the family went from not being able to believe this was happening to not liking being in their own home. Eventually, Peggy decided to call the Daily Mirror to come and investigate the supposed haunting. However, when the reporter arrived, nothing happened for hours. Only when the reporter was about to leave, something finally happened. When a photographer came back into the house, a Lego brick hit him above the eye, leaving him with a mark for a few days. After this incident, Daily Mirror called the Society of Psychical Research, who sent Maurice Cross to investigate the case. During his stay at the house, Cross witnessed over 2,000 different incidents. Janet, one of the daughters, recalls some of these, quote, "Furniture turning over, cups filled with water, fires igniting, voices, levitation. The most frightening encounter was when a curtain wrapped itself around my neck next to my bed." Cross also collected several hours of cassette and videotape evidence of this incident, along with Guy Playfair, who later went on to write a book about this haunting. They both reported, quote, "curious whistling and barking noises coming from Janet's general direction." During Cross's stay at the house, the poltergeist started speaking through Janet. Janet would go into a trance-like state and start speaking in a deep, scratchy voice, claiming to be a ghost of a man named Bill Wilkins. It was later proven that a man named Bill Wilkins had in fact lived in the house. While speaking through Janet, Bill told Cross that he had died from hemorrhage at the age of 72 while sitting in the living room. He told Cross that he had been buried in the Durrance Park and came back to see his family. This whole thing faced a lot of skepticism, but Cross was so convinced of it being real that he offered the price of £1,000 to anyone who could reproduce the voice by trickery on ventriloquism. Anyway, in the end he got to keep his £1,000. For me, the voice is the only thing that kinda like sways me in the case, because the voice is really deep. And Janet is a little girl, like she's 11 years old. And it's like the voice really does sound like a grown man. It's like the only bit that kinda makes me question whether this was a haunt or a hoax. Because like everything else in this I can explain away by it being a, but the voice kinda makes me question it. I will say that.
Right, that's good. I'm 72 years old. I come from Durham graveyard, and I have right near the church where Rena lives. And all my friends come from there as well. And we all make a game and go to the pub, and then we pick your house, because I used to live here. And I will tell you some more, and if you don't tell anyone else, just let Mr. Hoax and Mr. Playback.
Anyway, while it was true that a man named William C.L. Wilkins had lived in 284 Green Street with his wife Ethel M. Wilkins immediately prior to the Hutchisons, Bill Wilkins didn't die from hemorrhage, even though yes, he did die in the house. Bill Wilkins died on June 20, 1963 from coronary thrombosis, so quite different from hemorrhage. Coronary thrombosis happens when blood is blocking the coronary artery. Meanwhile, hemorrhage means weakened blood vessels supplying brain bursts. When he died, Bill Wilkins was 61 years old, so almost 10 years younger than the poltergeist. The poltergeist also said it was buried in Durrance Park Cemetery, but that's actually not where Bill Wilkins is buried. His last resting place is next to his wife in Craig CCON 7625 in Lavender Hill Cemetery, Cedar Road. So there's a possibility that the Nottinghams, the family that helped the family on the first night of the haunting, had told them about the past resident of the house and what had happened to them. Fred Nottingham and then his son Vic had lived next door since at least the 60s. So it's not like impossible to imagine that they were at least friendly with the Wilkinses. By the way, the poltergeist also occasionally introduced itself as Vic's father Fred, who died when Janet was 7 years old. Anyway, if this is true, it's kind of weird that the Nottinghams never mentioned that they knew Bill Wilkins when this was all taking place. Maurice Gross waited for 19 years before Bill's son Terry contacted him up in 1996 after hearing him speak about the case. This was also the first time Maurice got any sort of confirmation on anything the entity had said. There was also other topic Bill liked to talk about, and it was periods. For an old man, Bill the poltergeist was really interested in periods. It's not exactly something you think old men would be interested in talking about, at least in my experience of old men, and my father is 64 actually, sorry. In my experience of old men, they'd rather chop their own arm off. For an old man, Bill Wilkins was really interested in periods and would ask a lot of questions about them. But I think 11-year-old girl would definitely be more interested in periods than a 60-year-old man. During these 18 months, a number of paranormal researchers visited the house, including Ed and Lorraine Warren, who showed up uninvited and were refused admittance to the house. However, they still publicly stated that they were convinced that the supernatural was responsible for the weird happenings inside the house. I haven't seen the movie, but I know that in The Conjuring 2, the part that Ed and Lorraine played in this case was exaggerated by like a lot. These two really love to exaggerate everything they were a part of, like if they saw a chair moving, haunting. Other researchers included American magician Milburn Christopher, but he didn't notice anything that could be called paranormal and was dismayed by suspicious activity on Janet's part. He later claimed that the poltergeist was nothing but the antics of a little girl who wanted to cause trouble and was very clever. Ventriloquist Brian Allen also visited the house, but he concluded that Janet's male voices were simply vocal tricks. Guy Playfair has also noted that whenever this demonic scratchy deep voice came out, Janet's lips hardly seemed to be moving. It has been argued that the alleged poltergeist voice was caused by fast vocal cords above the larynx. This is also supported by the fact that the poltergeist of a 60-year-old man seemed to have a vocabulary of a child. During an interview for BBC's Scotland, Janet put a hand in front of her mouth and disembodied voice came out. During this interview, the girls were asked how does it feel to live in a haunted house or something along those lines, and to which Janet replied, "It's not haunted," and to that Margaret said in a hushed tone, "Shut up." In his book, This House is Haunted, Guy Playfair wrote that he and Maurice Gross often doubted that some of the incidents were faked by the girls. A video camera actually caught Janet trying to bend spoons and trying to bend an iron bar. Gross also noticed Janet banging broom handle to the ceiling and hiding his tape recorder. Playfair thought it weird that the poltergeist had the habit of suddenly changing topics, a habit Janet also happened to have. The girls, or I guess no women, have confessed to faking some of the incidents. According to Janet, quote, "Oh yeah, once or twice we faked it just to see if Mr. Gross and Mr. Playfair would catch us. They always did." Later she said about 2% of the events were faked. When Margaret and Janet confessed to faking some of these incidents, Gross and Playfair compelled to retract their confession because other paranormal researchers were now making fun of them because they were fooled by little girls. When skeptic Joe Nickell examined the findings of paranormal investigators, he criticized them for being overly credulous. He mentioned that the picture of Janet allegedly levitating could easily be a picture of her bouncing on the bed. He noted it's worth remembering that Janet was a shoe sport champion. I honestly don't even think that looks like levitating in any way because I just see a little girl bouncing on the bed. Crosstad attributed tape recorder malfunction to paranormal activity, but according to Nickell, this jam cable occurring was usual with all the modern reel-to-reel tape recorders. Nickell also examined Playfair's account and press clippings, and he noted that this poltergeist had a habit of acting only when it was not being watched, and this was best explained by kids' pranks. Whether the Enfield Poltergeist was real or not, Janet and Margaret have managed to move on from the part of their life they described as traumatic. According to them, the haunting stays with you. As Margaret puts it stays with you every step of the way. It's just like death, really. It gets a little bit easier as time goes on, but the fear of the memories of it and what happened never leaves you. So that was the Enfield haunting.